So let's just first basically look what fallacies of defective induction are. So it's a fallacy in which the premises are too weak or ineffective to warrant the conclusion. So it's a bit different from fallacies of relevance. I think we covered this in class also. I talked about it, that in such fallacies, the premises are related or are relevant to the conclusion that is being drawn, but they're weak. They're not effective, right? So basically, an argument from the first one that we covered was argument from ignorance in these fallacies, which was a fallacy in which a proposition is held to be true just because it has not been proven false, or false because it has not been proven true. So if you remember, we discussed some examples of this also. I think I mentioned a very good example of how atheists give their arguments for the non-existence of God, or for how religious people give arguments for the existence of God. So you can't prove otherwise, so which is why this must be true. So we talked about some other examples of this also in class, so you can just go back to your notes, because I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have to move on. So let's just look at today's material, which is D2, the appeal to inappropriate authority. So as the name suggests, the appeal to inappropriate authority is basically a fallacy in which the conclusion is based on the judgment of a supposed authority figure, right? So it's a supposed authority figure because that authority figure or person has no legitimate claim to expertise in the matter, right? So here you have an argument in which you're drawing this conclusion, and to draw that conclusion, you're using this supposed authority figure who is perhaps could be a celebrity, who could be an expert in some field. But the problem here is that that person or those people, it could be more than one person, have no legitimate authority in the conclusion that is being drawn. So if you just look at the next slide, it'll probably be clearer. So it is reasonable to seek guidance of an acknowledged expert in the field, right? So let's just like look at it like that. So for example, if you're sick, so the chances are that you'll go see a doctor, right? Because you think and you believe, and it is understood commonly that doctors know a thing or two about, fixing someone's health, right? So that they have the expertise in medical science. That's why they're doctors, right? So it's not wrong to seek their guidance or help. So, but what if you have to construct a bridge, and then to construct that bridge, the person that you're seeking guidance from, or the person that you're building your argument through, is a doctor, right? So that would be a little problematic because a doctor is not an expert in engineering, right? So this is the problem with this fallacy. The appeal is made to parties having no legitimate claim to authority in the matter at hand, right? So it is based on testimonials. We see this a lot in advertisements. I'll just show you a video on YouTube also, where to make it much more clear. But basically, the gist of it is like this: that you have a person, P or people, right? And they're making a claim X, and on that claim, you're basically saying that X is true. Okay, so a common example is, like I said, advertising testimonials. But it could be a little tricky also, because the reason that I say this is because sometimes you have these amazing figures and they're saying something, but that does not mean that what just because they're amazing figures or they're celebrities or they're experts, whatever they say is going to be true. For example, let's look at this example. So Sheen, a well-known Catholic bishop, remarked that it would be as fatuous, which is wrong, for Albert Einstein to make judgments about God as it would be for Sheen to make judgments about relativity theory. Both of us, Sheen wrote, would be talking about something we know nothing about. So Einstein, obviously, we all know is an expert on relativity theory. But if he says something about God, or if he has said something about God, that wouldn't make that thing true, right? Because he's not an expert. Just like Sheen, if he says something about relativity theory, that would be not true either, because an argument based on these claims or these testimonials would not be a correct one, because it's not reasonable for us to assume that Sheen or Einstein knows about these things. So let me just give you a very good example. It's a funny one. So let me just share it with you. Right. So just look at this TBC, okay?
बेस्ट बनने के लिए खिलाड़ी लगाते हैं फील्ड में रगड़ा और माएं लगाती हैं इनके कॉलर्स पे रगड़ा। क्या ये दाग रगड़े बिना निकलेंगे? तो हो जाए मुकाबला रगड़ा वर्सेस नया एरियल तगड़ा। लेकिन पहले इन दागों को बनाते हैं और सख्त। अब इन जिद्दी दागों का सफाया करेगा नया एरियल।
नया और पहले से बेहतर एरियल, जिसका डबल एक्शन फॉर्मूला करे सख्त दागों की गहराई से सफाई सिर्फ एक धुलाई में।
तो रगड़ा जीता या नया एरियल तगड़ा?
Right. So I hope you understood this well with this example. So obviously, Wasim Akram, as we know, has no expertise in selling detergents, or he doesn't know, obviously, because he's a cricketer, he's a fast bowler, an ex-cricketer. So, but this ad is, is using him just because of his influence on the public to sell this product. So the argument basically is that just because Wasim Akram is endorsing it, that means it's a very good product that you should go and buy. So it's a fallacy in that sense, right? So write to me if you have any other examples of this kind of fallacy, and it's going to be very interesting. I'm sure. I'm sure you have a lot of examples. Okay, so moving on, D3 is false cause. It's a fallacy in which something that is not really a cause is treated as a cause. So if something is happening, you're saying that this is happening because of this, but that obviously has nothing to do with what has come about. So it's a fallacy in that sense. In other words, if something comes after something else, it doesn't mean that one event is the reason for the other. So for example, if a cat crosses my car and I just happen to have an accident a minute or so after that, that does not mean that the accident occurred because the cat crossed my car, obviously. So it would be a false cause in that sense. We use this example for, I think, another fallacy also, but yes, it's applicable here also. Superstitions can come about here also. Okay, so yeah, so look at this one. So someone just argued, as prayer has gone out of the schools, guns, knives, drugs, and gangs have come in. So what does that suggest? We get to hear this a lot, especially from the older people, our parents, grandparents, etc. They say, कि, अच्छा तो आपने नमाजें छोड़ दी तो इसलिए ये चीजें हो रही हैं. But you see, there's no causal connection, at least reasonably so, right? There's no reason for us to believe that is wajah se ye cheez ho rahi hai, but we do get to hear this a lot, right? Another version of this is also called a slippery slope. So in a slippery slope, essentially what's happening is that it's also a false cause, right? So that's how it starts. But it goes on and on and on. So you build something out of the other thing, and it's just a slippery slope, literally. For example, um, let's just read the definition of what it is first. So it's a type of false cause, fallacy, in which change in a particular direction is assumed to lead inevitably to further disastrous change in the same direction. So आपके पास एक चीज अगर हुई है और आप उसी को खींच तान के बोलो कि इसकी वजह से ये भी हो जाएगा और ये भी हो जाएगा और ये भी हो जाएगा और फिर इस वजह से ये पूरी जो ये तबाही ये सब कुछ सामने आ जाएगी. So that would be a false cause because your starting point and where you're taking that thing to go is in the wrong, is a very wrong direction. For example, let's look at this example. So it is not a reliable measure to determine the result. So let's look at legalization of prostitution के ऊपर जो arguments होती हैं, ठीक है? It is उसके against basically. So अगर आप कह रहे हो कि अगर prostitution की legalization नहीं होनी चाहिए, so this is this kind of argument that a lot of people quote. So they say legalizing prostitution is undesirable because it would cause more marriages to break up. But because, okay, the first is a false cause also, because marriages don't necessarily break up because of prostitution, right? marriages और वजूहात की वजह से भी टूटती हैं. You can't blame everything on prostitution, right? Prostitution का ये नतीजा तो नहीं होता. खैर, अगर आप ये मान भी लो, आगे देखो क्या हो रहा है, which would in turn cause the breakdown of the family. Okay, so उससे शादी टूटी, फिर फैमिली टूट गई, which would finally result in the destruction of civilization. So आप ये देखें कि slippery slope कहाँ से कहाँ जा रही है. So for example, it's a slippery slope because from one false cause, you're taking it to such an extent, like you're basically saying that the whole civilization will just, self-destruct because of one thing, which is legalization of prostitution. So this is what a slippery slope is. Okay. Guys, remember, if you have any questions or concerns, please write to me. Okay, so in these corona times, I would be much delighted if you write to me and we could communicate in various ways, in whatever ways we have. Okay, so the last one for today is D4, which is hasty generalization. It's also called a converse accident. It's very simple. I'll just quickly go over it. So it's a fallacy in which one moves carelessly from individual cases to generalizations. Okay, so जिस तरह आप आम ज़बान में हम कहते हैं generalize कर रहे हैं कोई, so that means it's a उसी तरह ये fallacy है, it's a hasty generalization. So for example, if you have a particular group of people, right? So and उस group में से अगर एक शख्स कोई एक तरह का है, for example, if someone smokes in a certain group, and because of that someone, we say that the entire group is has a bad habit of smoking, so that would be a hasty generalization, right? Because एक individual case को हम लेके पूरे उस group पे जल्दबाजी में generalize कर रहे हैं. So we see that a lot, especially about races and like people and like all kinds of stuff. For example, the one thing that comes to my mind is how African Americans are treated in America. They're generally thought to be these criminals basically by white people. That's a history generalization, because just because some of them happen to be criminals, that doesn't mean that the entire African American population are criminals, right? हमारे अपने मुल्क में भी इस तरह के बहुत examples हो गए हैं आपके पास. We make jokes of these things also. Anyway, so yeah, so coming back to what it is, so it's a common mistake we make when we draw conclusions about all the persons of things in a given class on the basis of the knowledge we have of one or a few of the members, such as stereotypes. Basically, ये सारा जो हमने अभी बात किया, these are stereotypes, right? So a single instance can offer support to a rule or a theory, but it cannot be a proof. So it's not the truth, obviously. ठीक है? Okay, so this is where this lecture ends. So I'll be uploading more, I think, in the coming days. We'll still be discussing fallacies. I'll try to finish it off in a week or two, and then